So, have you ever thought about your job as a mission field? You might remember in the 20th chapter of Matthew, there's this story about this guy who comes out to the marketplace and he finds people who don't have work and he puts them to work in their vineyard. And he does this like four times through the day. Well, you know, regardless of what your job is, chances are gone out to the marketplace and grabbed you and put you in that job for a reason. And his reasons usually have something to do with saving souls. Now, I think when you think of your job as a mission field and your purpose is to introduce and bring people to Jesus Christ, it gives your job a lot more meaning. As a matter of fact, it gives it eternal meaning. So, how do you go about doing that? It's not as hard as you think, but you've got to talk less than you act. Okay. So let's say you're at work. The first thing you have to do is you've got to become this beacon of light in a relatively dark world. In other words, you've got to have integrity. You've got to be transparent, and you've got to be different than most of the people in your workplace, because let's face it, most of the people in your workplace probably aren't Christian and do not have a relationship with Jesus Christ. So if they use a lot of coarse language, you don't. And if they don't, that doesn't mean you should, okay? If they're doing as little work as they can to get by, you put in a solid effort. If they have a negative attitude about their job, you have a positive attitude because, you know, you're there on a mission. If they generally are very untrusting, you be somebody they can trust. Those types of things. Be upbeat when they're down. You have to stick out, and you have to stick out for being good. Now, the next thing you do is you don't preach at all. You just naturally talk about Jesus like he's one of your other friends. Um, it use his name. It's not Lord Jesus Christ all the time. You very seldom use the full name of your friends. It's just Jesus. And you don't have to expound on it or say it in a preachy manner. You just throw the name out there. Say a little experience, very short little things, just so they know. Pray before you eat, something along those lines. It doesn't take much, but if Jesus is alive and part of your life, you have to show that. Okay. Then you've got to be ready to listen, because when you start acting this way, eventually you're going to get a chance and somebody's going to start having a reasonably serious conversation. It doesn't really matter. And you can take a little bit of a chance and just start asking questions, and questions like, so tell me, how have you, how does in your life, how do you interact with God? Or tell me the story of God in your life. I love the story one. That's a better way to ask. Or if they, right away say, well, I don't believe in God, a great question is, okay, tell me about the God you don't believe in, because maybe I don't believe in him either. That type of thing. But when they start talking, you have to listen. You can't, this isn't a time for you to comment or argue or correct or anything along those lines. You have to be very careful and try very hard to only ask questions. And you can always ask, there's two questions that they say something and seem to stop, or you're not sure, or anything along those lines. You ask one of these two questions or both. What do you mean by that? And why do you say that? The what do you mean by that usually gets the better response. And then you go back to listening. Now, if this has happened and you see people have to move down a line, first they have to trust you, then they have to be curious about you or curious about God in a little bit, and then you have to listen to their story so you have an idea what their frame of mind is. And then at some point, you need to tell your story. Okay. But you wait till they almost ask you or they actually do ask you. And sometimes they may ask it in a way that is ridiculing, but that's okay. Just go ahead and answer the question as if they asked it well. But you need to have your story ready. And it can be any interaction you have with God. It doesn't have to be your whole life story. You can just tell about one particular incident. And you may, for over a course of months or years, have this conversation multiple times with them and tell them about little different things that have happened in your life. But at some point, if they keep showing an interest and you keep being their friend, at some point you need to invite them to know Jesus themselves. You just say, hey, would you like to have a relationship with the Lord Jesus like I do? And if they say yes, you lead them in a prayer, simple prayer. They need to confess they're a sinner and that Jesus died on the cross for their sins and ask Jesus to become a living part of their life. It's pretty simple. Now, that's if they say yes. If they say no, that's fine. You can ask, why not? Or what would it take for you to say yes to Jesus? Something along those lines. And then you wait another opportunity. So I'm going to wrap this up with a little bit of a challenge. Think of one way you can start being a beacon of light in your workplace this week. Thanks.